How's it going, everybody? So I have been tasked with making two hammers today. One's going to be made out of brass and the other one is going to be made out of scrap aluminum. Now this is a project that I'm going to be doing in collaboration with Brads Workbench. Brad does have a YouTube channel, but he's a lot more active over on TikTok. So if you're on TikTok, go follow him over there. But the top link in the description is actually going to be to his Etsy store where he sells all kinds of really cool finishes. And trust me when I say these things are awesome. TikTok is a bit of a buzz about it right now because they really are legit. They're good finishes and I need to get some so that I can use them because I haven't had a chance to use them yet. So go check out the top link in the description. However, the first thing that I'm going to be doing today is I need to make a form for the hammers, so let's go do that.
The first step to any casting is the form. I had a pretty good sense of what I wanted, and so I used this old hammer as the base and then just kind of played with the design a little bit until I found something that I liked. It was my original intention to be able to cast the eye of the hammer as well, but this part really didn't turn out very well, so let's just skip past this part. Now, I filmed this right around the time that I broke my scroll saw, and if you remember that, I've done a video on how I repaired that, but I had to use a coping saw to cut the rest of the form. I knew that I wanted a little bit more character on the hammer, and in my head I was envisioning these 45-degree angle chamfers on the corners. And so I decided just to file these in using a 4-in-1 file. These added so much character to the piece. Even though I have a bunch of files, I keep finding myself reaching for this 4-in-1 file. They're really cheap, they're like 10 bucks, and I do about 90% of my filing with it. If you don't have one, go get one. Now that I got the forge running, one of the earliest tests I ever did with brass casting is I cast my smartphone. Let me know if any of you in the comment section actually watched that video, but I decided to go ahead and cut that apart, and I could use that as scrap brass for this project. This brass originated as a bucket full of 5.56 shells. One of the coolest things I've noticed about melting brass is you can seem to do it over and over again. It never seems to go bad. It seems like you can just cast this stuff as many times as you want. I have about an hour before the brass is fully melted, and so that gives me just enough time to set up one of these molds. This is just a pretty basic green sand casting, and I'm really not good at this step, so this is not something you should be copying. One of these days I'll learn how to do this properly. I promise I did get that little piece of sand off the top of the hammer before I put the next layer on. I took a little bit of extra time to clean it up off camera. This really is a process that I want to learn to get better at. I have another hammer project coming up over the next couple of weeks, and I need to get better at this casting process. That way I don't have to spend quite so much time cleaning it up over on the grinder. These hammers are already a ton of work. They're a ton of fun, but they're also a ton of work, and if I can figure out how to get a cleaner casting, that would help me out immensely. I tapped the top of the mold a couple of times to try to get it to release, and then when I lifted it up, I had a little bit of sand that had fallen onto the mold, but I figured that was good enough for me. And then when I pulled the form out of the mold, it pulled a lot of the sand up with it. Off camera, I did this about 5 times, and this was probably one of the best that I did. At this point, I was just willing to go with it. And now that the brass is finally past its 2000 degree mark, it's fully melted and ready to be poured. This is my favorite part. Now, anytime you're pouring hot metal like this, it's really easy to get your volumes wrong because I'm just kind of estimating anyway, but I was so excited that this thing actually worked first try and I didn't have to re-pour it. And now I just need to figure out if there are any negative voids in the piece.
Oh! Hell yeah! Oh, that's looking sweet! Can't even... Hold on. Oh! Don't touch the plastic. Look at that. It's gonna take a little while to clean up, but that's pretty good.
Now, like I said at the beginning, the first hammer needs to be made out of brass. That's going to be my hammer, and then Brad's hammer is going to be the aluminum one, and so I decided to melt down a bunch of pop cans to get as much aluminum as I could. Now, I've never done this process before, but apparently you can expect to get right around 20% aluminum, and the rest of it is just junk you're going to have to cast out. So it's a really good idea to cast these in something like a muffin tin so you can have ingots to work with and actually cast with that. I didn't do any of that. And since I didn't really know what I was doing, at the time I decided to just cut my losses, and I ended up using mostly aluminum bar to make the second hammer. I'm going to come back to this pop can thing at a later time. Now, behind the scenes, I probably made this mold about 6 times total, and none of them really worked out perfectly.
Alright, let's see how this worked. Whoa, it's blue. Alright, it's a good casting.
So now that the hammers are done being cast, I can spend the next couple of hours and grind them to their basic shape. These things were such a mess, but you can see the shape in there, right? It didn't take too long, probably a couple of hours of grinding, and I was able to get it to the shape I wanted it. Like I said, casting things is not exactly my expertise, and so this was a lot of fun to learn to do this, and I do want to get better at this over time, but you can see how absolutely trashed these things were. They took a lot to clean up. After a few hours of cutting and grinding, these things looked sick when they were done, and I switched over to a flat disc sander to get them most of the rest of the way into shape. Now, because I wasn't able to appropriately cast the eye of each of the hammers, I had to mill them instead, so I went out and I bought this 1/2-inch milling bit and I chucked it into my drill press. This is less than ideal, and I was having a heck of a time getting these to mill, but eventually I was able to get them to the shape that I wanted. I set my drill press table to 5 degrees, that way the eye is going to be wider on the top than it will be on the bottom. And between the two of them, that should give me about a 10-degree difference. In preparation for this project, I went out and got a selection of hand files, and I'm so glad that I did that because they sort of saved this project. There was a lot of fine-tuning by hand. And then, of course, I can repeat all the same steps for the aluminum hammer. The last thing I needed to do was to buff the hammers, and every time I buffed them I would find a few more scratches that I could then sand off and then rebuff, and in just doing this over and over again, eventually I was able to get a beautiful shine on them. One of the things you'll notice when you're working with metals is that they will show all of the flaws. With wood you can kind of hide that a little bit, but with metal it takes such a long time to sand out all of those scratches, and if you don't get out every single one of those scratches, you're going to notice them as you're buffing. So you really have two options. You can either sand them and sand them and sand them until you get the perfect finish that you want, or one of the things that I've done in the past is if you kind of want to cheat a little bit, you can just throw them in something like a sandblasting machine, and it kind of gives them a very dull look. But if you're going to be making a hammer that's going to be used anyway, that might be the direction to go. I decided I wanted mine to have a mirror finish, and I think it was well worth it.
Alright, thank you all for watching. I got the hammers all wrapped up. They're going to be sent over to Brad's now, and I have not yet seen what he's going to be doing with the handles. I have no idea, so you're going to find out the same time I do. Like I said, go check the top link in the description. It's going to be to his Etsy store. I'm also going to be putting his TikTok and YouTube down in the description as well, so you can find that if you want to follow along. And thank you all for watching. It's on its way, Brad.